They looked at his hoodie and saw nobody. They looked at his skin and saw a threat. But what the gate agent at JFK didn't know was that the man he just kicked out of first class wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who had just signed the paycheck for every employee in the terminal. Meet Elias Thorne. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just checked his watch, walked to the back of the plane, and waited. 45 minutes later, the pilot received a terrifying call from air traffic control that grounded the flight, locked the terminal, and turned a routine trip into a corporate bloodbath. Stick around to see exactly what happens when arrogance meets absolute power. This isn't just a story about karma, it's a lesson in survival. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the anxious sweat of holiday travelers. It was 8:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the queue for Aerolux Airways Flight 902 to London. Heathrow was already snake-like, winding past the velvet ropes. Elias Thorne stood near the back of the priority lane, thumbing through a notification on his cracked iPhone 12. He wasn't a man who broadcasted his presence. Dressed in a charcoal oversized hoodie, faded Levi's, and a pair of worn-out Nike Dunks, he looked more like a tired graduate student than a titan of industry. The only hint of his status was the platinum Patek Philippe Nautilus, tucked subtly beneath his sleeve. A watch worth more than the entire education of the gate agent staring him down. Elias was tired. He had just spent 72 hours in intense negotiations in Silicon Valley. His software firm, Obsidian Systems, had just quietly finalized the acquisition of a massive logistics subsidiary that supplied back-end navigation tech to major airlines. He wanted sleep. He wanted champagne. He wanted the lay-flat seat in 1A that he had paid $14,000 for. He stepped up to the counter. The sign above read, Sky Lounge, First Class Priority. The gate agent, a man with gelled blonde hair and a name tag that read Preston, didn't even look up from his computer screen. He was typing furiously, or pretending to. Next, Preston muttered. Elias stepped forward, sliding his digital boarding pass onto the scanner. Morning, just one carry-on. The scanner beeped a sharp, angry red tone. Preston finally looked up. His eyes did a quick, judgmental scan. Hoodie, sneakers, dark skin. A sneer ghosted across his lips before he quickly masked it with professional condescension. Sir, Preston said, his voice loud enough for the people behind Elias to hear. This line is for first class and Diamond Medallion members only. Economy boarding is in Zone 4. You need to wait by the window. Elias didn't flinch. He was used to this. I know, I'm in seat 1A. Scan it again, please. Preston sighed, an exaggerated exhalation of breath that signaled his annoyance. Sir, systems don't make mistakes. If it beeped red, you're in the wrong zone. Please step aside so I can help the actual priority passengers. It beeped red because your system is glitching, Preston, Elias said, his voice calm, baritone and steady. Check the name, Elias Thorne. I don't need to check the name to know you're holding up the line, Preston snapped. He gestured to a security guard standing 20 feet away. Do we have a problem here, or are you going to move? Behind Elias, a voice piped up. Come on, buddy. Some of us actually have places to be. Elias turned. Standing there was a man who looked like a caricature of wealth. Tan suit, slicked back hair, holding a Toomey leather briefcase. He was tapping his foot impatiently. This was Bryce Sterling, the son of a mid-level hedge fund manager, though Elias didn't know that yet. You heard the man, Bryce said, stepping into Elias's personal space. Economy is that way. Stop trying to scam an upgrade. Elias looked at Bryce, then back at Preston. I'm not asking for an upgrade. I paid for the seat. Check the manifest. Preston rolled his eyes, and finally, aggressively, typed the name into the terminal. Thorne. Elias. The screen flashed green. Seat 1A, confirmed. Status, invitation only. Preston blinked. He stared at the screen. The computer confirmed that this man in the hoodie was the highest priority passenger on the manifest. But Preston's pride was already engaged. He had already performed for the audience. He couldn't back down now. Well, Preston said, a malicious glint entering his eyes. It looks like there's a flag on this ticket. A flag? Elias asked. I bought it yesterday. Amex Centurion. Yeah, that's the problem. Fraud alert. Preston lied smoothly. We've had a lot of stolen credit cards used for last-minute first-class bookings lately, especially with profiles matching yours. The air around them grew cold. Are you accusing me of stealing a credit card? Elias asked, his voice dropping an octave. I'm saying I can't board you in first class until this is cleared by HQ, which won't happen until after takeoff, Preston said, enjoying the power trip. However, since the flight is full, I can do you a favor. I have an open seat in 42C, right by the lavatory. You can take that, or you can not fly. You're bumping me from 1A to 42C because you think it might be fraud. I'm following protocol. Preston smirked. He looked at Bryce. Mr. Sterling, so sorry for the delay. Since seat 1A is now technically open and you're next on the upgrade list, would you like to take it? Bryce's face lit up. Now that is service. Absolutely. Elias watched as Preston printed a new boarding pass for Bryce, handing him the golden ticket that belonged to Elias. Bryce grabbed it, shouldering past Elias. Better luck next time, pal. Maybe try the bus. Elias stood frozen for a moment. The disrespect was absolute. It was visceral. Last chance, 42C, Preston said, holding out a flimsy economy ticket. Or I call security. Elias looked at the ticket. Then he looked at Preston. A slow, terrifyingly calm smile spread across Elias's face. It wasn't a smile of submission. It was the smile of a predator watching a rabbit step into a snare. I'll take 42C, Elias said softly. I really need to be on this plane. Wise choice, Preston laughed. Elias took the ticket and walked down the jet bridge. As he walked, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Hello? Sarah. Elias whispered into the phone. Wake up the legal team and get the chairman of Aerolux on the line. No, not the CEO. The chairman. Yes. Tell him to look at who just acquired the debt on his Boeing fleet. I'll hold. The walk to the back of the Boeing 777 was a gauntlet of humiliation. Elias had to walk through the first-class cabin he was supposed to be in. He saw Bryce settling into seat 1A, accepting a glass of pre-flight champagne from a flight attendant. Bryce saw Elias and raised the glass in a mocking toast. Careful back there. Don't trip over the chickens. Bryce laughed. A few other passengers chuckled nervously. Elias said nothing. He kept moving. Business class passed. Then premium economy. Finally, he reached the chaotic jungle of economy. Row 42 was the very last row. The seat didn't recline. The smell of the chemical toilet was pungent, and the overhead bins were already jammed with oversized backpacks. Excuse me, Elias said to the woman in the aisle seat, a tired mother with a screaming toddler. She sighed and moved her legs. Elias squeezed into 42C, his knees pressed firmly against the plastic seat in front of him. It was hot. The air conditioning hadn't fully kicked in yet. A flight attendant, a sharp-faced woman named Sheila, came by, slamming overhead bins shut. She saw Elias checking his phone. Sir, phone off. We are pushing back in 10 minutes, she barked. We haven't even started the safety briefing, Sheila, Elias said, reading her name tag. I have a few minutes. It's policy, she snapped, and put that bag under the seat. If it doesn't fit, we're checking it. It contains lithium-ion prototypes, It can't go in the hold, Elias said calmly. I don't care if it contains gold bars. If it sticks out, it goes, Sheila said. She kicked the bag with her heel, jamming it violently under the seat, crushing the fabric. Elias closed his eyes. Strike two. He looked down at his phone. Sarah, his chief operating officer, had sent a text. We have confirmed the acquisition documents. Obsidian Systems now technically owns the navigational software rights for Aerolux's entire Eastern Fleet. We also hold the maintenance contracts. Elias, you literally own the switch to their planes. What do you want to do? Elias typed back. Don't shut down the fleet. Just this plane. Flight 902. And get me the direct line to the cockpit. Override the comms if you have to. The plane shuddered as the tug pushed it back from the gate. The engines whined to life. The safety video began to play. Up in first class, Bryce was stretching out, laughing loudly on his phone. Yeah, I got bumped up. Some loser tried to fake a ticket. I'm telling you, Dad, these people try anything. Back in 42C, Elias waited. He watched the minutes tick by. 8:45 a.m., 8:50 a.m. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. They were fourth in line for takeoff. Elias typed one last message. Now. Suddenly the plane jerked. The pilot hit the brakes hard. Passengers gasped as they were thrown slightly forward. The hum of the engines spooled down from a roar to an idle whisper. Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding confused. This is Captain Miller. We've just received a mandatory stop order from Air Traffic Control and our own corporate headquarters. We're being ordered to return to the gate immediately. Apologies for the inconvenience. A groan went up through the cabin. Probably a mechanical issue, the guy next to Elias muttered. No, Elias said, staring out the window at the terminal they were returning to. It's not mechanical. It's personnel. The plane didn't just go back to the gate. It was met by 3 black SUVs and 2 airport police cruisers on the tarmac. The passengers were whispering frantically. Is it a bomb threat? Why are there police? The plane came to a halt. The fasten seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Captain Miller's voice came back on, shaking slightly. Folks, please remain seated. We have a security situation. Corporate has flagged a severe violation of federal aviation contracts regarding this specific flight. We are waiting for a board representative to board the aircraft. In the front galley, Sheila and the other flight attendants were confused. Who is the board representative? Sheila whispered to her colleague. Is he on the ground? The cabin door opened, but no one walked in. Instead, the lead flight attendant's phone rang at the front station. She picked it up, her face draining of color. She listened for 10 seconds, looked toward the back of the plane, and nearly dropped the handset. She hung up and walked briskly down the aisle, past first class, past Bryce, who was complaining loudly about the delay, past business, all the way to row 42. The entire cabin watched her. She stopped at 42C. Mr. Thorne? She stammered. Elias didn't look up from his iPad. Yes? Captain Miller has been informed that you are to be escorted to the cockpit immediately. The CEO of Aerolux is on the satellite phone for you. The silence in economy was deafening. The mother next to him stopped rocking her baby. The man who had complained about the mechanical issue dropped his jaw. Elias unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up, smoothing out his hoodie. Tell the captain I'm not coming to the cockpit. Sir, if Richard Sterling wants to talk to me, Elias said, his voice carrying through the silent cabin, he can come here and tell the gate agent, Preston, to get on the plane. I want everyone involved in this conversation. Sir, we can't bring ground staff onto the... You're grounded, Sheila, Elias said calmly. The plane isn't moving. The software that guides this aircraft belongs to me. And right now, I've revoked your license to use it until I get an apology and a refund, so go get Preston." The lead flight attendant ran to the front. 5 minutes later, the cabin door opened again. Preston, the gate agent, walked in, looking annoyed and confused, flanked by an airport manager. "What is going on?" Preston demanded. "I have a line of people at the terminal." The captain stepped out of the cockpit. He was a grey-haired veteran, and he looked furious. He pointed at Preston. "You. What did you do to the passenger in 1A?" "I moved him," Preston stuttered, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "He was a fraud risk. I put Mr. Sterling in the seat." "The man you moved," the captain roared, holding up a manifesto printed on a tablet, "is Elias Thorne, CEO of Obsidian Systems, the company that just bought the debt on this airline's entire terminal lease. He doesn't just have a ticket, you idiot. He owns the mortgage on the gate you're standing at." A collective gasp ripped through the plane. In seat 1A, Bryce Sterling sank lower into his seat, his face turning pale. Elias walked slowly up the aisle from the back. It was a long walk. He walked with the grace of a panther. Every eye was on him. The hoodie no longer looked cheap. It looked like the eccentric disguise of a king. He stopped at row 1. He looked down at Bryce. "Comfortable?" Elias asked. Bryce couldn't speak. He stuttered, "I didn't know." "Get up," Elias said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Bryce scrambled out of the seat, spilling his champagne. Elias didn't sit down. He turned to Preston, who was now trembling near the cockpit door. "You said systems don't make mistakes, Preston," Elias said, stepping closer. "You were right. The system didn't make a mistake. The first-class ticket was valid. The mistake was you assuming that a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly be the most powerful person in the room." "I was just following protocol," Preston whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. "No," Elias said. "Protocol is checking ID. Protocol is verifying payment. What you did was profiling. And now, we're going to discuss the price of that mistake." Elias turned to the captain. "Captain, put Richard Sterling on the speaker." The captain handed Elias the satellite handset and pressed a button to patch it into the cabin PA system. "Elias," the voice of the Aerolux CEO boomed through the overhead speakers. "Elias, I am so incredibly sorry. I just got the report. This is a disaster." "Richard," Elias said into the phone, looking dead at Preston. "I'm sitting on the tarmac at JFK. Your staff denied me boarding, accused me of fraud, and put me in a non-reclining seat by the toilet. I'm thinking of pulling our navigation license. That would ground Aerolux globally for what? 3 days while you switch vendors?" "Elias, please," the CEO begged, his voice echoing in the silent plane. "Don't do that. That would bankrupt us. Name your terms. Anything." Elias smiled. "I don't want money, Richard. I have enough money. I want a personnel restructuring, starting right now, at Gate 4. The silence in the cabin was heavy, the kind of silence usually reserved for courtrooms right before a verdict is read. Elias Thorne stood in the aisle, the satellite phone in his hand, his voice amplified through the Boeing 777's PA system. Every passenger, from the cramped economy seats to the spacious first-class pods, was listening. "Richard," Elias said into the phone, his eyes locked on Bryce Sterling, who was now standing awkwardly in the aisle, champagne dripping from his cuff. "I want you to clarify something for the passengers of Flight 902. Who is the current occupant of Seat 1A, the one I was removed for?" There was a pause on the line. The static of the satellite connection hissed softly. "The manifest says Bryce Sterling," Richard's voice came back, sounding weary. "Bryce Sterling," Elias repeated. He took a step closer to Bryce. "Any relation, Richard?" The cabin held its breath. "He's my son," Richard admitted, his voice cracking with humiliation. "Elias, I had no idea he was on that flight. I swear to you." A murmur of outrage rippled through the plane. Passengers began pulling out their phones. The camera lenses were aimed like weapons at Bryce, Preston, and Elias. This wasn't just a delay anymore. It was a live-streamed execution of a reputation. "Your son," Elias said, letting the words hang in the air. "So let me get this straight. Your gate agent, Preston, bumped the man who owns your debt to make room for your son, who was on a waiting list, and then accused me of credit card fraud to justify it." "Dad!" Bryce yelled at the ceiling speakers, his face flushing a deep, angry crimson. "Dad, don't listen to this guy. He's nobody. He came in looking like a bum in a hoodie. Preston said he was a security risk." "Shut up, Bryce." Richard's voice roared through the speakers, so loud the feedback screeched. "Shut your mouth right now." Elias turned his gaze to Preston. The gate agent was shaking. The colour had drained from his face so completely he looked like a wax figure. "Preston," Elias said softly, "you have the CEO on the line. Do you want to explain to him why you flagged my Amex Centurion, a card that has a dedicated concierge team just for verifying large purchases, as fraudulent?" Preston stammered. "Mr. Sterling, sir, the system, it beeped red, I thought." "You didn't think," Elias cut in. "You judged. You saw a hoodie, and you saw skin color, and you decided I didn't belong in your world. And now you're about to find out that you don't belong in mine." Elias lifted the phone again. "Richard, here are my terms. If you want Flight 902 to take off, and if you want to keep your navigation software license for the rest of your fleet tomorrow morning, you need to do 2 things immediately." "Name them," Richard said instantly. "First," Elias said, pointing at Preston, "I want Preston fired, not suspended, not under review. Fired. For cause, discrimination and falsifying a security report. And I want him escorted out of this terminal by the police for filing a false claim against a passenger." "Done," Richard said. "He is terminated effective immediately. The station manager is already walking down the jet bridge with the paperwork." Preston's knees buckled. He grabbed the back of a seat to steady himself. "You can't do this. I have a union." "You committed a crime, Preston," Elias said coldly. "Unions don't protect you from filing false police reports." "And the second thing?" Richard asked. Elias looked at Bryce. The arrogant air looked small now, shrinking under the collective glare of 300 passengers. "Your son walks," Elias said. "What?" Bryce snapped. "I'm not going anywhere." "He gets off the plane," Elias continued, ignoring Bryce. "And not just off the plane. I want him banned from Aerolux for 1 year. If he wants to fly to London, he can fly commercial on another carrier, or maybe he can take a boat." "Dad, you can't be serious!" Bryce screamed. "I have the gala in London tonight." "Bryce," Richard said, his voice cold and final, "get off the plane. Hand your boarding pass to the flight attendant. You are embarrassing the family, and you are jeopardizing the company. Get off. Now." Bryce looked around. He looked at the flight attendants, who were looking away. He looked at the passengers, who were smirking. He looked at Elias, who was simply waiting. "Fine," Bryce shouted. He grabbed his Toomey bag from the overhead bin, yanking it down violently. "This airline is a joke anyway. And you," he sneered at Elias, "you're going to regret this. My lawyers will eat you alive." "My lawyers wrote the laws yours study," Elias replied calmly. "Goodbye, Bryce." Bryce stormed down the aisle, shoving past the flight attendants. As he exited the plane, a spontaneous round of applause broke out in the economy cabin. It started slow, a few claps from the back, and swelled into a roar. Elias didn't smile. He handed the phone back to the captain. "We're not done yet, Captain," Elias said. "There is one more seat transaction we need to make." The captain, sweating but relieved that the crisis seemed to be de-escalating, nodded. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. Seat 1A is yours. We can have the cabin crew prepare it immediately." "No," Elias said. "I don't want seat 1A." He turned and walked back down the long aisle, past the gawking faces in business class, past the whispers in premium economy, all the way back to row 42. The mother with the crying toddler was looking up at him with wide, fearful eyes. She had been trying to hush her child the entire time, terrified of drawing attention. Elias crouched down in the aisle next to her. "Mom," Elias said gently. "What is your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah, I'm sorry about the commotion," Elias said. "I noticed you were struggling with the baby back here. It's tight and it's hot." "It's okay," she said, bouncing the baby. "We're used to it." Elias stood up and looked at the lead flight attendant, who had followed him. "Give Sarah and her child seat 1A, Elias commanded, "and the seat next to it, 1B, so she has room for the baby's things." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Sir, I can't pay for that." "It's paid for," Elias said. "I paid for it. Consider it an apology from the airline for the delay." "But where will you sit?" Sarah asked, tears welling in her eyes. Elias looked at seat 42C, the cramped, non-reclining seat by the toilet. "I'll take 42C, Elias said. "I have some work to do and I don't want to be disturbed." He looked at the flight attendant. "Move her up, now, and bring me a black coffee. That's all." The entire plane watched in stunned silence as the young mother, carrying her baby and a diaper bag, was escorted to the front of the plane like royalty. As she passed the business class section, the applause started again, louder this time. It wasn't for the drama, it was for the humanity. Elias sat down in 42C. He pulled his hood up. He put his headphones on. "Captain," Elias said to the flight attendant, "tell Richard he can take off now." The flight to London was 6 hours and 40 minutes. For Elias, it was quiet. No one dared to recline their seat into him. The flight attendants tiptoed around him, offering him water bottles and snacks every 20 minutes, which he politely declined. But while the plane was in the air, disconnected from the internet, the world below was catching fire. The passengers on Flight 902 hadn't just watched the confrontation, they had recorded it. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, 3 different videos had been uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram using the airline's Wi-Fi. The hashtags were trending within an hour: Aerolux racism, the man in the hoodie, Elias Thorne, Karma flight. Video 1, posted by IWasTravelGirl99, showed Preston sneering at Elias and the fraud alert conversation. Caption: "Gate agent judges billionaire because of a hoodie. Watch him get destroyed." Views: 4.2 million in 2 hours. Video 2, posted by a tech bro Dave, showed the confrontation with Bryce Sterling and the CEO on the speakerphone. Caption: "CEO of Aerolux forced to fire his own son from the plane by the guy who owns their debt. This is legendary." Views: 6.5 million in 3 hours. Video 3, posted by Wat Mama Bear, showed Elias giving his first-class seat to Sarah and the baby. Caption: "He took the worst seat on the plane so a mum could rest. I am sobbing. This man is a hero." Views: 12 million in 4 hours. By the time Flight 902 touched down at Heathrow, Elias Thorne wasn't just a tech CEO anymore. He was a global phenomenon. But Elias didn't know that yet. He walked off the plane, his back stiff from the economy seat. He just wanted to get to his hotel. As he exited the jet bridge, however, he saw a wall of flashing lights. Reporters. Paparazzi. "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Thorne, is it true you're buying the airline?" "Mr. Thorne, what do you have to say to Preston?" How is economy, sir? Elias pulled his hood down. He stopped. He saw Sarah Jenkins waiting by the baggage claim exit. She looked rested, her baby asleep in her arms. She saw him and pushed through the reporters. "Mr. Thorne!" she called out. The cameras turned to her. She ran up and hugged him. It was awkward, unauthorized, and genuine. "Thank you. You have no idea. I was flying to London for my husband's funeral. He was in the military. I didn't know how I was going to survive that flight with the baby. You saved me." The cameras clicked furiously. Elias's expression softened. The shark-like business demeanor vanished for a second. "I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah," he said quietly. "Do you have a ride?" "I was going to take the tube," she said. Elias turned to his personal driver, a massive man named Marcus, who was waiting with a sign. "Marcus, take Ms. Jenkins wherever she needs to go. I'll take a cab." "Sir?" Marcus asked. "Do it," Elias said. As Sarah was ushered into Elias's waiting Rolls-Royce Phantom, Elias hailed a black London taxi. The reporters were shouting questions, but one voice cut through the noise. It was a BBC correspondent. "Mr. Thorne, Bryce Sterling has just tweeted that he is suing you for defamation and emotional distress. He claims you staged the whole thing. Comment?" Elias paused with his hand on the taxi door. He turned to the camera. His eyes were dark, tired, and dangerous. "Tell Bryce," Elias said, his voice low enough that the microphones had to strain to catch it, "that he should save his money for a good defense attorney, because by tomorrow morning he won't be suing me. He'll be answering to the SEC. He got in the taxi and slammed the door. The next morning, the London stock market opened at 8 a.m. Aerolux shares plummeted 14%. Obsidian Systems shares rose 8%. Elias didn't sleep. He spent the night in the penthouse suite of the Shangri-La at the Shard, turning the hotel room into a war room. He had 3 laptops open. His legal team in New York was on video conference on the big screen. "Okay, break it down," Elias said, sipping an espresso. "It's messy, Elias," his general counsel, a sharp woman named Jessica, said from New York. "Bryce Sterling is an idiot, but he's dangerous. He's filed an injunction in New York claiming you used undue influence and economic duress to force him off the plane. He's playing the victim. He says you targeted him." "And the airline?" "Richard Sterling is panicked," Jessica said. "The board is calling for his head. The video of him admitting he didn't know his son was on the flight makes him look incompetent." But here's the kicker. Preston, the gate agent, has gone on Fox News. He's claiming he was intimidated by your aggressive behavior and that he's a victim of a woke billionaire power trip. Elias laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "They want to fight? Okay, let's give them a war." "What's the move?" Jessica asked. "Trigger Clause 14B of the debt agreement," Elias said. The lawyers on the screen went silent. "Elias," Jessica warned, "that's the nuclear option. If you trigger 14B, you're calling in the full value of the loan due to reputational damage affecting the asset's value. Aerolux doesn't have that kind of cash. You'll force them into immediate bankruptcy." "I know," Elias said. "Do it." "But why? You'll lose money on the restructuring. It's not about the money," Elias said, looking out the window at the rainy London skyline. "It's about sending a message. I want a board meeting called. Today. In London. I own 40% of the voting shares through the debt conversion. I want Richard there. I want Bryce there. And I want that gate agent, Preston, dialing in." "Preston isn't on the board," Jessica noted. "He is a witness to the material breach of contract," Elias said. "Get him on the line." The meeting, 2 Marsept. PM. The conference room in the Aerolux London headquarters was glass-walled and cold. Richard Sterling sat at the head of the table, looking 10 years older than he had yesterday. Bryce sat next to him, looking sullen and defiant, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. Elias walked in. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. He was wearing a bespoke Savile Row suit, navy blue, cut to perfection. He didn't sit. He stood at the opposite end of the table. "Gentlemen," Elias said. "This is a witch hunt," Bryce spat out. "You think because you have money you can bully us?" Elias threw a folder onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Richard. "That," Elias said, "is a copy of the filing my team just submitted to the Delaware Chancery Court. We are foreclosing on the Aerolux fleet." Richard went pale. "Elias, you can't. That kills the airline. 15,000 jobs." "The airline is already dead, Richard," Elias said. "Look at your stock. No one wants to fly with a company that treats people like cattle. But I have a solution." "What?" Richard asked, desperate. "I will convert the debt into equity. I will take majority control of Aerolux. Private. Today." "You want to buy us?" Bryce laughed. "For how much?" "For $1, Elias said. "Go to hell," Bryce shouted, standing up. "Sit down, Bryce," Richard yelled. He looked at Elias. $1, and you take the debt?" "I take the debt. I save the 15,000 jobs. But the leadership changes." "What changes?" Richard asked. "You retire, Richard," Elias said, "with your full pension, but you step down. Today." Richard slumped. He nodded slowly. He knew he had lost. "Agreed." "And him?" Bryce pointed at himself. "I have shares. My trust fund holds 5%. Your shares are worthless if the company goes bankrupt," Elias explained calmly. "But in my buyout, I'm being generous. I'm buying your shares out at current market value, which is very low. But here is the condition." Elias pressed a button on the remote, and a screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a live feed of Preston, the gate agent, sitting in his living room, looking terrified. "Preston," Elias said to the screen. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, sir," Preston squeaked. "I'm the new owner of Aerolux," Elias said, "and I'm reviewing your employment file. It says here you were fired yesterday." "Unfairly," Preston shouted. "I'm willing to rehire you," Elias said. Preston blinked. Bryce blinked. Richard looked confused. "You are?" Preston asked. "Yes, but not as a gate agent. You clearly don't have the temperament for customer service. However, we have an opening in the sanitation department, specifically cleaning the lavatories on the inbound flights from long-haul trips. It's the night shift, minimum wage. But it has benefits." Preston's face turned purple. "You want me to clean toilets?" "It's a job, Preston," Elias said. "It's honest work, and it's the only job you'll ever get in aviation again, because I'm blacklisting you from every other role. Take it or leave it." Preston stared at the camera. He had a mortgage. He had debt. He had no choice. "I'll take it," Preston whispered. Elias turned to Bryce. "And you, Bryce, I have a role for you too." "I don't work for you," Bryce sneered. "Actually, part of the buyout of your trust fund requires you to remain as a brand ambassador to vest your stock." Elias smiled. "Your new role is simple. You're going to be the face of our new Economy Plus campaign. You're going to fly economy, row 42, on 10 consecutive long-haul flights. We're going to film it. You're going to show the world how comfortable it is." "I will never do that," Bryce said. "Then you lose your trust fund. Read the fine print, Bryce. Your dad signed it over 10 minutes ago." Bryce looked at his father. Richard couldn't even meet his eyes. 10 flights, Elias said. Economy. Middle seat. No priority boarding. You start tomorrow. Bryce slumped back into his chair, defeated. Elias buttoned his jacket. Meeting adjourned. 6 months had passed since the incident that became known globally as the Hoodie Mutiny. JFK's Terminal 4 didn't look different on the outside. The glass was still cold and imposing. The tarmac was still a symphony of roaring engines and burning jet fuel. But inside, the atmosphere had undergone a radical, almost cellular transformation. It was no longer just the Aerolux terminal. The signage had been updated. Above the check-in counters, the old blue and white branding was gone, replaced by the sleek, intimidating matte black and gold aesthetics of Obsidian Systems. The font was sharper. The lighting was moodier. It felt less like a transportation hub and more like the lobby of a very exclusive, very strict private bank. But the biggest change wasn't the paint job. It was the fear. There was a palpable tension among the staff, a hyper-awareness that hadn't existed 6 months ago. The new employee handbook, ghostwritten by Elias Thorne's legal team, was 300 pages long. It contained a new zero-tolerance policy on profiling that was so draconian, staff members were terrified to even frown at a passenger. Into this new world walked a familiar figure. Elias Thorne stepped through the automatic sliding doors at 8 a.m. sharp. He was dressed exactly as he had been on that fateful Tuesday. The same charcoal oversized hoodie, the same faded Levi's, and the same scuffed Nike Dunks. He had the hood pulled up, casting a shadow over his eyes. He wasn't doing this to be theatrical. He was doing it to test the system. He walked toward the priority check-in lane. The velvet ropes were thicker now, the carpet redder. The line was empty. Standing behind the podium was a new agent. Her name tag read Aisha. She was young, perhaps 24, with sharp eyes and a posture that suggested she had memorized the training manual verbatim. She was typing on her terminal when she sensed movement. She looked up. 6 months ago, Preston had looked at Elias and seen a threat. He had seen a vagrant invading a space reserved for the elite. Aisha looked at Elias. She saw the hoodie. She saw the sneakers. She paused for a microsecond, a flicker of human instinct, but then the training kicked in. Or perhaps she recognized the silhouette that was now painted on a mural in the staff break room as a reminder of the incident. "Good morning, sir," Aisha said. Her voice was steady, warm, and utterly professional. There was no sneer, no skepticism. "Welcome to Obsidian Aerolux, flying directly to London Heathrow today." Elias lowered his hood slowly. He placed his phone on the scanner. Yes, just one carry-on. Aisha didn't flinch when the name appeared on her screen. Thorne, Elias, Chairman. She didn't gasp. She didn't faint. She simply typed a command, her fingers moving with the precision of a pianist. "It is an honor to have you flying with us, Mr. Thorne," she said softly, printing the boarding pass. It was heavy stock, gold-edged. "I see you are in Sat 1A. We have pre-cleared your TSA status, so you can bypass the main security checkpoint. The private elevator is to your left." Elias looked at her. He was looking for a crack in the facade, a hint of the old arrogance that permeated this place. He found none. "Thank you, Aisha," Elias said, his voice gravelly. "How is the new management treating you?" Aisha smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuine. "The pay is 30% higher, sir, and the shifts are shorter. We're happy." "Good," Elias said. "Keep up the good work." He took his boarding pass and turned toward the private elevator. As he walked, the terminal seemed to part for him. Passengers whispered as he passed. The legend of the billionaire in the hoodie had become urban folklore. People looked at his shoes, wondering if they were a secret signal of wealth. But Elias wasn't heading straight to the lounge. He had a detour to make. He walked past the high-end duty-free shops, past the caviar bar, and turned down a narrow corridor near the restrooms by gate B12. This was the unglamorous part of the airport, the place where the illusion of luxury faded into the reality of industrial maintenance. A yellow "Caution Wet Floor" sign was set up in the middle of the hallway. Behind it, a man in a grey, shapeless jumpsuit was pushing a heavy industrial mop bucket. The man looked aged. His once gelled blonde hair was now limp and hidden under a grey cap. His skin, previously tanned and manicured, looked sallow under the harsh fluorescent lights. He was scrubbing a sticky soda spill, the rhythm of the mop back and forth, monotonous and draining. It was Preston. Elias stopped 10 feet away. He didn't say a word. He just watched. A teenager in a tracksuit walked past Preston, engrossed in his phone, and kicked the "Wet Floor" sign over. "Hey!" Preston called out, his voice raspy. "Watch where you're going." The teenager turned around, headphones around his neck. "Relax, janitor. It's your job to pick it up, isn't it?" Preston's face flushed a deep, angry red. His hands gripped the mop handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. For a second, Elias saw the old Preston, the man who would have called security, who would have exerted whatever tiny amount of power he had to humiliate someone. But Preston didn't yell. He couldn't. He had a mortgage. He had alimony. He had a breathalyzer interlock on his car. He had nowhere else to go. Preston swallowed his pride, a bitter pill that he now took daily. "Yes, sir," Preston muttered. "Sorry, sir." He bent down to pick up the sign. As he stood up, he saw the pair of Nike Dunks. Preston froze. Slowly, painfully, he looked up. He saw the jeans, the hoodie, the face. The silence between them stretched for an eternity. The hum of the terminal faded away. It was just the king and the exile. Preston didn't beg. He didn't ask for his old job back. He knew, with a terrifying clarity, that he was exactly where he deserved to be. He gave a short, stiff nod, a gesture of surrender. "Mr. Thorne," Preston whispered. "Preston," Elias acknowledged. "Mr. Spot." Elias pointed to a small, sticky patch near Preston's left boot. Preston looked down. He looked back at Elias. Then he dipped the mop into the grey water and scrubbed the spot. Elias turned and walked away. There was no joy in it, only the cold satisfaction of balance restored. The universe had corrected itself. Elias boarded the plane through the exclusive jet bridge reserved for first class. The flight attendants, now wearing the sharp black uniforms of the new brand, greeted him by name. The cabin was immaculate. The scent of fresh orchids filled the air. But Elias didn't sit in 1A immediately. He walked through the galley, past the curtain, and into the long, narrow tube of the main cabin. He walked all the way to the back. The economy cabin was filling up. Families were wrestling with luggage. Students were jamming backpacks into overhead bins. It was the chaotic, cramped reality of modern travel. And there, in row 42, the last row, the one that did not recline, right next to the lavatories, sat the final piece of the puzzle. Bryce Sterling was squeezed into seat 42E, the middle seat. To his left was a large man who had already fallen asleep and was encroaching on the armrest. To his right was a teenager eating a pungent tuna sandwich. Bryce looked terrible. He had lost weight. His eyes were rimmed with dark circles. He was holding a GoPro camera on a selfie stick, the red RESA light blinking. "Hey guys," Bryce said into the camera, his voice lacking any of its former bravado. "It's Bryce again. Welcome back to episode 8 of The Reality of Coach. We are heading to London. It's a 7-hour flight." He paused, looking at the lens with dead eyes. I think the air conditioning is broken back here again. And yeah, smash that like button." He lowered the camera and put his head in his hands. "Bryce," Elias said. Bryce's head snapped up. When he saw Elias, a mix of hope and hatred washed over his face. "Elias," Bryce croaked. Please tell me this is over. I've done 7 flights. 7. I went to Dubai and back in a middle seat. I have blood clots in my legs. My dad won't return my calls." "The contract said 10 flights, Bryce," Elias said, leaning against the overhead bin. "You signed it. Your father countersigned it." "I can't do it," Bryce whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Look at this. The guy next to me smells like onions. My back is killing me. I'm a brand ambassador, right? Can't I advocate for better leg room or something?" "That's actually a good idea," Elias mused. "Maybe in season 2. "Season 2? Bryce looked like he was going to vomit. "There's a season 2? "Only if you breach the contract for season 1, Elias said. 3 more flights, Bryce. Then you get your trust fund back. Well, 80% of it. The other 20% is going to charity." "Which charity?" Bryce asked bitterly. "The Sarah Jenkins Foundation." Elias smiled. Bryce groaned and slumped back into his seat, inadvertently elbowing the sleeping man next to him, who grunted and shoved Bryce back. "Have a safe flight," Elias said. He turned and walked back to the front of the plane, leaving the purgatory of row 42 behind him. Elias settled into seat 1A. It was a private suite with a sliding door. He pressed a button, and the seat adjusted to his exact ergonomic preference. A flight attendant appeared instantly with a crystal glass of sparkling water and a hot towel. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "we are ready for departure. Is there anything else you need?" "No," Elias said. "Actually, yes. Do you have the Wi-Fi code?" "It's already connected on your device, sir." Elias unlocked his phone. He opened his email. At the top of his inbox was a message he had been waiting for. From Sarah Jenkins. Subject: "You changed our lives." Elias opened it. Attached was a photo. It showed Sarah standing in front of a small, lovely house with a sold sign in the yard. She was holding her baby, who was smiling. The strain and terror that had etched lines into her face 6 months ago were gone. The text read, "Dear Mr. Thorne, I don't know if you read these, or if this is just an assistant, but I had to tell you, because of the trust you set up for little Leo, I didn't just pay for the funeral. I paid off my debts. I bought a home where Leo can grow up safe. I'm going back to nursing school next month. You didn't just give us a seat on a plane. You gave us a landing. You saved us. I tell Leo every night that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they wear hoodies. God bless you. Sarah." Elias stared at the screen for a long time. The plane began to taxi. The engines roared to life, that deep, powerful vibration that signaled the transition from earth to sky. He thought about Preston, scrubbing the floor. He thought about Bryce, cramped in the middle seat. He thought about Sarah, safe in her new home. He had played God. He knew that. He had destroyed 2 lives to save 1. Was it fair? Perhaps not in a court of law. But in the court of karma, the ledger was balanced. He locked his phone and slid it into the side pocket. He reclined the seat all the way back into a flat bed. He pulled the heavy duvet over his chest. They had looked at his hoodie and saw a nobody. They had looked at his skin and saw a threat. But in the end, they had learned the most important lesson of the modern world. True power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to make a scene. It just needs to wait. The wheels left the ground. The plane banked sharply over the Atlantic, climbing toward the sun. And for the first time in 20 years, Elias Thorne didn't need a sleeping pill. He closed his eyes. and he finally, truly slept. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the flight that changed everything. Elias Thorne didn't just buy an airline, he bought justice. He proved that sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to burn it down and rebuild it from the ashes. Preston is still cleaning floors, Bryce is still flying coach, and his YouTube channel is actually doing pretty well, though mostly because people love watching him suffer. And Sarah? She's living the life she deserves. It makes you think, how many times have we judged someone by their appearance? How many Elias Thornes have we walked past, assuming they were nobodies? If this story gave you chills, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button right now. It helps the algorithm find more people who need to hear this message. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification so you're the first to see next week's story. I want to hear from you in the comments. Did Preston deserve a second chance, or was the janitor job too harsh? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone. You never know who you're talking to.